Hello and welcome to the Brothers' War, Casus Belli, Episode 3. Last time we covered the compromises of 1850 and introduced Stephen Douglas, and today we will be covering the debate surrounding and the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the beginning of the real disunion. The election of 1852 has ended, and the Whig Party is collapsing. The Democrat Pierce defeated the Whig Scott by a landslide. The electoral vote went 254 to 42. And you're going to want to remember Scott's face. He also holds the position of commanding general of the U.S. Army, which, I don't know, may be important if a war were to break out in 9 years. The Democrats increased their House majority by 33 seats and only lost 1 seat in the Senate. They now had a trifecta, and in the wake of the ill-fated Nashville Convention, which temporarily, as we will see, broke the back of Southern solidarity, were almost completely unified. At this point, there is wide suspicion and sentiment that the Whig Party is no longer viable as opposition to the always more powerful Democrats. As the new Congress and the new executive settled down to do their work, the primary task facing them is the organization of the Louisiana Purchase lands, since people are starting to settle there. Stephen Douglas, now the chairman of the Senate Committee on Territories, proposed a solution on January 4, 1854. He outlined 2 new territories to be made, called Nebraska in the north and Kansas in the south. Both of these territories lay to the north of the Compromise line and would therefore not be permitted to have slavery within their borders under existing law. Remember that this is Stephen Douglas we're dealing with, and I'll remind you that Stephen Douglas is in favor of popular sovereignty, always and always. He worked this bill out with Southern Democrat and rabid slave owner David Atchison, and the two of them worked out that if they repealed the 1820 Missouri Compromise, which was probably unconstitutional anyways, and settled the slavery question in the 2 new territories by popular sovereignty, then the southern Kansas, right next to slave-owning Missouri, would be settled by people who were pro-slavery, and Kansas would subsequently become a slave state. Likewise, Nebraska would be settled by pro-freedom settlers from Iowa, and it would subsequently become a free state. Douglas thought that this would make everyone happy, and that more importantly, he could now build that transcontinental railroad that appeared to him in a vision from time to time. Douglas presented this bill to the Senate floor and immediately had the support of both the northern and southern wings of the Democratic Party, as well as the Southern Whigs. With this clear majority, only the Free Soilers, Know-Nothings, and Northern Whigs stood opposed in a clear minority, but not to worry, this compromise would be great for them too, and they would eventually come around. Or so Douglas thought. He had grossly miscalculated the impact this would have on the Northern Whigs, Free Soilers, Know-Nothings, and even some Northern Democrats, who got together and called themselves the Independent Democrats. That's Democrats with a small d. To the Independent Democrats, a breach of the 1820 Compromise was unacceptable. It was a massive concession to slave power. They published the January 1854 manifesto titled Appeal of the Independent Democrats, again, that's Democrats with a small d, against the proposed bill. They outlined a slave power conspiracy to spread slavery into the North and made clear Southern aggression in the matter, and articulated that, fundamentally, the Constitution was an anti-slavery document, and that the founders intended slavery to be a temporary institution. Speaking explicitly of disunion, they said that the Union will be worthless, and when it becomes worthless, it cannot long endure. This manifesto was widely circulated in the North, and the slave power conspiracy theory ran at a fever pitch. Douglas's coalition called them hypocrites. After all, just 4 years ago, they broke the almost coalition of Northern Whigs and Southern Democrats by refusing to extend the 1820 Compromise line, and furthermore, they said that the Independent Democrats were putting words into the founders' mouths. After all, a ton of the founding fathers were slave owners. The Independent Democrats replied to this by stating their opposition to the extension of the Compromise line was based only on the fact that it was intended to cover the Louisiana Purchase only and not the Mexican Cession, which was technically true, but the preferred tactic was to blast slavery as the awful institution that it was, and always couched their opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska bill as an opposition to slavery. Now this is a first for mainstream national politics. If you recall, much of the opposition to slavery so far has been limited to a handful of individuals, and the majority of the opposition has been based on objections to implementation or caution of its spread. But now, after years of hearing the slave power conspiracy, and remembering the fuss the Southern Democrats put up about introducing slavery to the Mexican Cession, and with copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin in hand, this burgeoning anti-slavery coalition is now firmly opposing slavery on the basis of its immorality and its economic impacts. The 2 previously opposed anti-slavery camps, abolitionists and economists, are coming together in opposition to the Democrats. Free Soiler Charles Sumner blasted Douglas's coalition in a February 21st speech that painted the end of the Missouri Compromise as a sign of the decline and degradation of the country, falling away from the anti-slavery intentions of the founders. He said, "Our republic has swollen in population and power, but it has shrunk in character. It is not now what it was in the beginning. a republic merely permitting, while it regretted slavery, but a mighty propagandist, openly favoring and vindicating it. A petition of Northern clergymen organized by Northern Whig Edward Everett presented 3,000 signatures against the passage of the bill, calling it a full danger to the peace and a harbinger of disunion. Even the abolitionist giant Frederick Douglass spoke out against Senator Douglas, stating in his newspaper that the senator resolves to ride into power over hecatombs of dissevered limbs and bleeding hearts of the millions of his fellow countrymen. He writes Nebraska for slavery on his haggard brow, and with his vesture dipped in the blood of men and women and children, he sallies forth upon his murderous mission. However, all these objections aside, the Democrats held a trifecta, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed in the House and the Senate and signed into law by Pierce on May 30th, 1854. The spark was lit. So severe was the Northern backlash to the Democratic Party that a coalition composed of the vast majority of the Free Soil Party, together with a substantial amount of Northern Whigs and Democrats, got together, and in May they met and called for the establishment of a new opposition party, dubbed the Republicans. Vehemently and openly anti-slavery, they organized in Wisconsin and Michigan and started writing newspapers. This coalition was a big tent of anyone opposed to the extension of slavery at this time, and cut across class divisions to include manufacturers, farmers, and wage workers, united only in their belief of free labor, and these economically minded men joined with the more moralistic Free Soilers and even a small group of abolitionists to present a united Northern front against Southern slave expansionism. They were not all abolitionists. Many were in favor of a slow, gradual emancipation, and some just wanted to limit the spread, but they could all agree that the Kansas-Nebraska Act was a huge boon to slave power, and that the Whigs needed to be replaced, and that the slave-powered Democrats had to go down. But not all the Northern Whigs and Democrats were in their camp, and the nascent Republicans often could not beat the long-established Whigs. At first, it was not the Republicans, but the existing Know-Nothings that were able to capitalize on this disillusionment with the Northern Whigs. The Know-Nothings played on the fears that the Whigs had for far too long been appealing to the Catholic Irish immigrants and used this sentiment to win seats in local and state elections. They were also able to channel this anti-Irish sentiment against the Democrats as well, saying that it was awfully suspicious how often the Irish voted for the Northern Democrats. Winning elections is always easier if you've got a good scapegoat. The Know-Nothings also proposed extending the naturalization period required for citizenship from 5 years all the way to 21, and extended the presidential restriction that he had to be born in the USA to all public offices. They also played on the racist stereotypes of the Irish as drunkards to win over the teetotaler anti-liquor demographic, which was always a significant movement in the North, especially in New England. The almost overnight resurgence of the Know-Nothings was really down to their ability to use conspiracy theories and sophistry to portray a clear enemy, whether that enemy was Irish popery, slave power, foreign interference, Southern chauvinism, or what have you. And the Know-Nothings did in fact take root in many urban and suburban areas. And therein lies the key to the later downfall of the Know-Nothings. They really could only grow and spread in the urban and suburban areas, whereas the Republicans were truly viable on the national scale with their cross-class alliance. There's kind of a finite number of people who will buy your conspiracy that the Pope is trying to conquer the United States. Even though the Know-Nothings could win some votes in the South, the Republicans could potentially win every vote in the far more populous North, and you can bet your boots who the millions of Irish Americans voted for. It was not just in the North that conspiracy theories and a new round of partisan musical chairs was being held. Southerners, seeing the rapid decline of the useful opposition Whigs, who rarely, if ever, challenged the legitimacy and constitutionality of the institution of slavery, and seeing the rise of a new party that only exists to oppose the spread of slavery, your average plantation owner is feeling a little nervous. His neighbors to the north, in his mind, are acting a little aggressive. In 2021, it's very easy for us to point out the absurdity of seeing opposition to slavery as aggression and not seeing slavery as aggression. But to the average Southerner, both slave-owning and poor white, with slavery baked into every facet of culture, economy, and daily life, a challenge to the white supremacist structure of the antebellum South really did seem like aggression. I also have to say that, by and large, the Republicans are still not abolitionists, and they never will be an abolitionist party, although there will always be, from its very inception, abolitionists in the party. It was an anti-slavery party, and being anti-slavery and being an abolitionist are not the same thing. Being anti-slavery meant voting for the Whigs. Being abolitionist meant eschewing voting altogether until the Republicans come around, and for many, not even then. Being anti-slavery meant halting the spread of slavery to the territories through the legislature. Being an abolitionist meant fighting in the territories to prevent the settlers from bringing slaves in. Being anti-slavery meant an anti-slavery interpretation of the founders' intentions and the Constitution. Being abolitionist meant rejecting the founders' ownership of slaves and seeking the higher law than the Constitution. Being anti-slavery meant open discussion in the public forum. Being abolitionist meant hushed words in the basement. Being anti-slavery meant passing laws forbidding the shipment of slaves to the country. Being an abolitionist means the Underground Railroad. Being anti-slavery meant the ballot box. Being an abolitionist meant a rifle. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. With the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the rise of the Republican Party and the resurgence of the Know-Nothings, the midterm elections were held. In the Senate, the Democrats held on to the majority, by 1 seat. When the results came in, the Democrats held 33 seats, the Whigs 14, the Republicans 3, the Free Soil Party, those who did not join the Republicans, won 2, and the Know-Nothings a single seat. Only 5 of the 21 senators up for re-election kept their seats. The others were flipped or primaried. In the House, the results were staggering. The Democrats went from a comfy majority of 150 seats to a mere 81, losing their majority vote. The Whigs went from 54 to 17. The Know-Nothings got 51, the Anti-Nebraska Party 22, the Republicans 13, and the People's Party 9. The Anti-Nebraska Party and the People's Party were both formed out of moderate northern Whigs and Democrats, by the way. They won't last long. This was the death knell for the Whigs. It was proven to the people of the North and South that they were no longer viable as an opposition party, and the Democrats now had to be opposed by a firmly anti-Nebraska, somewhat anti-slavery coalition of parties. A coalition that now had the majority vote in the House. From now on, the Punnett Square of American politics is broken, and the Southern Whigs have been absorbed into the Southern Democrats. The Northern Democrats and Whigs are turning into a new anti-Kansas coalition, the Republicans are rising, and the Southern Democrats are very, very afraid of any kind of Republican Northern aggression. It is also at this crucial junction that retired U.S. Representative for Illinois Abraham Lincoln would finally join the Republican Party. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Also, I'm very proud to announce that I finally figured out an upload schedule. In essence, it will be a video published almost every Saturday until early April. I'm currently in school, and things are starting to get very busy, so I will be taking a break from research, writing, recording, and editing. That will have already started by the time you're watching this and running until the 24th. But not to worry, by the time you watch this, the next episode, part 1 of Bleeding Kansas, will already be recorded and edited, and will go up on the 20th. On the 27th, I'll upload part 2 of Bleeding Kansas, followed by the Dred Scott decision on March 6th, the election of 1860 on the 13th, at which point I will be taking a much more serious break for midterms, and there will be no upload on the 20th. But there will be the video on secession and formation of the Confederacy on the 27th. In April, things will be even lighter, since finals will be right around the corner, but there will be an intro to 19th century warfare on the 3rd, and I'm very proud to say that on April 12th, 160 years after, to the day, I will upload the first episode of the regular series covering April 1861. Huzzah! I will immediately be taking a break for actual finals week, being broken only by the second episode of the regular series covering May 1861, being uploaded on International Workers' Day, Saturday, May the 1st, followed by the first special on a yet-to-be-determined subject on May 15th. Please leave suggestions for specials in the comments below, as well as questions for the Q&A and whatever else you'd like to put in there. Please be sure to share this video with a history buff in your life, and I'll see you next time, where it's time for us to take a break for electoral politics, because Kansas is a territory now. You can move there. And if you're an abolitionist, or if you really, really like slavery, there's actually going to be a very important election to be held there on the subject at some point. It's time to pack your bags and load your rifles, because Kansas is about to bleed.